marketing researcher, but I was never really interested in the sort of big consumer markets, because you're worth it, just do it, I'm loving it kind of thing. Was never mine. What was always interesting to me was selling and marketing in complicated, complex, difficult markets. The main question that I've been asking myself in the last couple of years is how can I, as an academic, help technology innovators navigate and shape complex ecosystems? My recent research has been in the area of digital health. Digital health is the idea of infusing healthcare with technology, which can range from electronic health records to self-management tools for chronic illnesses such as diabetes, to little clip-ons on the iPhone that you can do a photograph of your eardrum to see if you have an ear infection. Digital health has the potential to lower healthcare costs and to improve access, of course, for people who may live far away from a hospital or from a specialist, and to alleviate pressure on the entire system. But it's a complicated, difficult market to sell into. It's complicated for several reasons. One of the reasons is that it's a multi-stakeholder ecosystem. So when you're selling into this kind of market, you're not just selling to a patient, you're selling to a clinician, you're selling to a nurse, you're selling to a hospital manager, you're actually selling to a regulator, you're selling to an insurer who's going to have to pay for the technology. So when you're designing for the customer, as innovators do typically, the first question you have to ask yourself, who is the customer? Because you've got multiple layers of multiple customers in this ecosystem. The second reason why it's a complicated market to sell into is that it's systemic. So even as a technology provider, if you're selling a point solution, you're selling it into a system. So say you're manufacturing a little otoscope, little clip-on for your iPhone that can take photographs of your kid's eardrum, okay? Great invention, keeps you from running with your child to A&E at 3 o'clock in the morning, okay? However, then the question is for this technology supplier, who's going to analyze the data? Who's going to look at the photograph? Where's the data going to interface with? What's the interoperability like? Who's responsible? What's the legal situation? How is it regulated? So there's a host of questions, systemic questions, that technology suppliers have to answer before they can ever approach a buyer in these kinds of markets. And the third reason why it's a complicated market is that it's very highly regulated for good reasons. Healthcare is conservative and it has to be. If you take a pill, of course you want to make sure that that's been tested thoroughly, that it's safe to take, that it doesn't have huge side effects, etc. With technology, that becomes a very difficult question. So if you have a step counter on your wrist and that's off by a bit, you might take 9,000 steps instead of 10,000. That's not going to kill you, okay? If you self-manage diabetes, okay, and your diabetes app or self-management tool is off, that can be a very dangerous situation. So the whole issue of regulation weighs very heavily. It's a really difficult market to sell into. It's a growth market, so it has a lot of potential for these technology suppliers. But what it takes for them to sell into these markets is a really multidimensional approach. They have to have expertise from various different areas, so healthcare, technology, regulatory, a lot of the time pharmacological because they're interfacing with pharma as well. They have to have a really good grasp of the customer's problems. And what I mean by that is, the clinician's daily life. They're so busy, they're not going to want to get, to adapt to all these bits and pieces of technology. The technologies have to fit into their workflow, into their daily lives, likewise for nurses and for patients for that matter. So it's a very interesting space, but it's a space with a whole load of challenges. And my research has been looking to help companies, technology, entrepreneurs and innovators overcome these challenges and to sell digital health to make healthcare better for us all. I was very lucky in getting a Marie Skłodowska-Curie Global Fellowship, which I've been on for the last 2 years, and that allowed me to do research in the digital health ecosystem in 3 different countries, namely the US, France and Ireland, and do a comparative study. So I spent a year at UC Berkeley in a place called Citrus, which is a bit of a mouthful. It's the Center for Information Technology in the Interest of Society. And they do a lot of digital health research. And so I was doing an ethnographic study in the Silicon Valley digital health ecosystem. And I interviewed a lot of technology suppliers. I interviewed regulators. I interviewed hospital managers. I interviewed venture capitalists, just to get a grasp of how technology entrepreneurs can navigate and at the same time shape this ecosystem. And then I took the research to France. I was in Paris for 3 months, and I did confirmatory interviews to see how different cultures work differently with these entrepreneurs and allow entrepreneurs to explore different markets in different ways. You know, obviously we all have this notion of Silicon Valley being sort of the absolute dream for innovators and entrepreneurs, and maybe European markets being that much more difficult, you know, which is not always the case, as it turns out, you know. And in Ireland, I'm working with a technology centre that is sponsored by Enterprise Ireland called ARCH, Applied Research in Connected Health. And we've been working with a range of stakeholders to really help them to apply their technologies in the Irish healthcare system. And I think digital health has come a very long way in Ireland, and we're at the cusp of seeing something very, very interesting happening.